Okay, so today we're just continuing on from what we did on Friday. Friday we did ellipses with the center at 0, 0. So we just had x squared and y squared on top. But now we're going to translate them, put them in the HK form. The center is at HK. And when it's horizontal, the larger number is under the x squared term. And when it's vertical, the larger number is under the y squared term. So when I use that here, I'm saying that b is greater than c on these. Okay. So if I want to graph x minus 1, the quantity squared over 16, plus y plus 2 squared over 36. First thing I want to know is where's the center, and is it horizontal or is it vertical? So first of all, where's the center? Right, we can just look at the h and k, and we get that it's 1, negative 2. It's just going to be the opposite because it's x minus h, y minus k. All right, and then the larger number is under the y squared, so what is it? Vertical. It's vertical. So, so my distance to my vertex squared is 36, so the distance to the vertex has to be 6. So I can go ahead and plot my point. The center is at 1, negative 2, and then I'm going to go up 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because it's vertical, and down 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's my vertices. They are at 1, 4, and 1, negative 8. And you can see, if you look at the points, like just the numbers, the center, the y was at negative 2, and all I did was I added 6. Negative 2 plus 6 is 4. I subtracted 6. Negative 2 minus 6 is negative 8. So you guys see the relationship between all the parts of this? Okay. Now we'll do the same thing with the co-vertices. My co-vertice, the distance squared is 16, so the distance has to be 4. So going to the left 4 and to the right 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm essentially adding 4 to my x value and subtracting 4 from my x value. So 1 minus 4 is negative 3, but it's still at negative 2. And does that jive with what I have on my graph? Is that where the point ended up? It is, yeah. And then the other point is at 5, negative 2. Because again, if we just do 4 plus 1, we're going to get that. All right, so the only part that's like maybe a little bit tricky is finding the foci. So to do that, we use that relationship that f squared is equal to b squared minus c squared. And so I don't know the f squared, but I've got 36 minus 16, so that's 20. So the distance to the focus is going to have to be the square root of 20, which we write as 2 root 5. And just so I can graph it, I'll figure out that from a decimal standpoint, it's about 4.5. So going to the center, I'm going to go up 4.5. 1, 2, 3, 4.5. And go down 4.5. And there's the foci. So in terms of what the actual points are, for both of them, my x value is 1, right? Okay, but my y value, I started at negative 2, and here I added that 2 root 5. And for the other one, I started at negative 2, and I subtracted 2 root 5. So I'm going to write that as negative 2 plus 2 root 5, and negative 2 minus 2 root 5. And that way I have the exact location of the focus, not just an approximation with a decimal. And that's the way that you're going to be that it's going to be given to you in the problems. That's the way that the answers in the back of the book are going to be written. So you guys need to be comfortable using it in the radical form. You can't just turn it into a decimal and write the points with decimals, okay? You need to be able to be comfortable with those radicals. Any questions about what I did? That's my answer. Well, that and the graph, because I was supposed to graph it and then identify those things. All right, so on your whiteboards, here's one for you guys to practice. And it's a little bit big, so if it doesn't totally fit on your whiteboard, that's okay. Or you could make each square worth 2. It's up to you. Okay, so this one was horizontal, and the center was at -3, 4. The vertices ended up coming out to -15, 4 and 9, 4. And again, you can see, like, my x was at -3, but then it's changing by 12. So if I do -3 minus 12, I get -15. If I do -3 plus 12, I get the 9. So you can also figure it out mathematically or graphically. Although these you had to graph anyway, so you might as well just use the graph. The co-vertices are -3, 13, and -3, -5. And then the foci were at -3 minus 3 root 7, comma 4, and -3 plus 3 root 7, comma 4. Some other questions on that? No? Okay. All right, so next we'll write some equations given 2 points, or in this case 4 points, on the ellipse. So I have that the vertices are at 14, 2 and -8, 2. So what's changing, the x or the y? Yeah, x is changing. So that means I'm going from left to right. So what kind am we going to have here? It's going to be horizontal. And so you can always just draw yourself a little picture if you want to. I'm going from -8, 2 to 14, 2, and then 3, 9, down to 3, -5. So I can just find the midpoint of one of those. Obviously, it's going to be at 3, and then halfway between 9 and -5. Or if I look at my x coordinates, I have a couple of 2's, don't I? So basically what ends up happening is, see how the 2 never changed? That's the y coordinate for my center. And in the co-vertices, the 3 never changed. That's my x coordinate for my center. But if you don't remember that, you can always find the midpoint, and that will also give it to you. So my center is going to be at 3, 2. And now I just have to figure out how long each of those pieces of the axis is. So for here, I was going from 3, and I went backwards to -8. And that's my major axis. How far did I go?
11.
I went a distance of 11 units. So that means that, excuse me, the distance to the vertex is 11. And then if I look at this other distance here, I'm going from 9 on the y-axis down to 2, so I traveled 7. And so the distance to the co-vertices was 7. And now I have enough information to write the equation. It's going to be x minus 3 squared and y minus 2 squared on top. And because it's horizontal, my larger number is under the x's. So 11 squared, or 121, is on the bottom there, and 7 squared, or 49. So finally, I'm left with x minus 3 squared over 121 plus y minus 2 squared over 49 equals 1. So, like I said, it's optional whether you want to draw the little picture. If you can figure it out mathematically and know what's going on and do it correctly, I'm okay with that. But if you keep messing it up and are having a hard time keeping it straight in your head, go ahead and draw a picture. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay? You can always use a graph to go off of. So when you're done writing that one down, here's one for you to practice. The vertices are at -10, 11, and -10, -13. Co-vertices, -3, -1, and -17, -1. So first figure out, is it changing in the x or the y direction? So what do I think about this one? I heard vertical. Yeah, it's changing in the y direction, so yeah, this one's going to be vertical. Then figure out the center. Once you have the center, you can figure out the distance to the vertex and the distance to the co-vertex. Okay, so we figured out what's vertical. The center is at -10, -1. So the distance to the vertex was 12. And then what about to the co-vertex? That came out to 7. So I take my x plus 10 squared, and I have my y plus 1 squared. And since this one's vertical, the larger one is under my y. So 12 squared, or 144, goes here. 7 squared, or 49, goes on that side. And that's your final equation. Okay, questions? All right, let's move on then. Okay, so now we'll do one where they give us the vertices and the foci. So looking at my vertices or my foci, both of those are on the major axis. So I'm noticing that I'm changing in the x direction. So this one has to be horizontal. And so all they've given me is one axis. And then my foci are at 10, so my center is going to have to be at 10, which it is. If you do 22 minus 2 and divide it by 2, you get 10. All right, so then I went minus 3 root 7 and plus 3 root 7 to get to the focus, right? So that means that my f value, the distance to the focus, was 3 root 7. So f squared is going to be 9 times 7, or 63. And then I know v squared because I can figure out the distance v from 10 to -2, or from 10 to 22. How far did I go? I went 12, right? So my v squared is 12 squared, or 144. So then I can use the relationship that I had of f squared equals v squared minus c squared. So 63 equals 144 minus c squared. And so I get that c squared is 81. So now I have everything I need. I've got my c squared, I've got my v squared, and I have my center at 10, -4. So it's horizontal, so x minus 10 squared will be over 144. And then y plus 4 squared is over 81, and that equals 1. All right, so now let's do one where all they give us is the foci and the co-vertices. I can still figure out if it's vertical or horizontal. The foci are on the major axis, and so what's changing here, my x or my y? The y is changing. And so if y is changing, it has to be vertical, right? And then I can look and see what's not changing on each of them. On both of them, or on the foci, the x is -1 and it doesn't change, right? Because we're going up and down. So I know my center, the x, has to be -1. And then if I look at the co-vertices, my x is changing and my y isn't, so the center has to be at -4. But again, if you don't see that or can't remember that, you can always graph it and make sense out of it from the picture. Okay? All right, so my center is at -1, -4. I think I will actually draw a little picture to go with this one. Oops, it's vertical, so I didn't do a very good job there. There we go. Okay, so my center is at -1, -4, and my co-vertices are at -7, -4, and 5, -4. So my distance to the co-vertices, C, is I'm going from -1 up to 5. How far did I travel? I traveled 6. So C is equal to 6. And then to my foci, I am adding 2√7, or subtracting 2√7. So my distance to my focus is 2√7. So these actually, when you first look at it, they seem like they're really kind of hairy and nasty, but it really makes it obvious what the distance is to the focus because they're telling you exactly what's being added and subtracted. So if I do f squared equals v squared minus c squared, my square 2√7 is 4 times 7, or 28. And I don't know v squared, minus 6 squared, which is 36. And so if I add 36 to both sides, I get that v squared is 64. So v is 8. Although I don't really care because I'm just writing an equation. So I take my center at -1, -4, which means I'm going to have an x plus 1 squared and a y plus 4 squared. And this one is vertical, so my larger number has to be under the y squared, and the smaller, 36, is under my x squared. So as long as I give you 2 of the 3, you can figure out what the equation is by finding the distances to the various parts of the ellipse. Are there any questions on this one? Okay. The last kind of problem, oh, and I didn't erase it. Oops. Clear ink. Okay, the last kind of problem you're going to see is one where we have to complete the square to figure out the equation. So I'm going to get my x's together and I'm going to get my y's together and put the number on the right side of the equation. So I've got a 2x squared plus 28x, and then I have plus 13y squared minus 104y, and if I subtract 46 from both sides, it equals -46. So again, be careful with your signs. Don't make it a positive 46 or that's going to mess everything up. Now I have to complete the square. So before I can complete the square, I need to factor that 2 out. And factor the 13 out from the y's. So in my first parentheses, I've got x squared plus 14x. So what do I need to complete the square there? Half of 14, which is 7, and you square it, and that's 49. But am I only adding 49 one time? No. How many am I actually adding? I'm adding it twice because of that too. So what I'm really adding is 2 times 49. And then with my my y squareds, I've got y squared minus 8y. So what do I need to add? 16. But what I'm really adding is 13 times 16. So 2 times 49 comes out to 98. And 13 times 16 comes out to 208. So now if I write it in factored form, I have 2 times the quantity x plus 7 squared plus 13 times the quantity y minus 4 squared. And when I add negative 46, 98, and 208, I end up with 260. And I'm almost there, but what does it need to be on the right side? Oh, 1. So I'm going to divide everything by 260. And then it's just a matter of reducing the fractions. So 2 goes into 260 130 times. 13 goes into 260 20 times. And then, of course, that becomes 1. So my final answer would be x plus 7 squared over 130 plus y minus 4 squared over 20 equals 1. Okay, any questions? All right, that's it for today then.